debt collection agency pool that we source the loans that are over a year too. So normally, even though the delinquency, you are delinquent when you're 90 days in arrears, what we tend to do, we keep those loans internal and try to contact the customers. So we wait up to a year time to send them to the collection agents to get um, for them to pursue collections. However, once the students clear their arrears, it is sent back internally, so there's no more collection fees applied to their account. And we engage the guarantors when we had those were applicable as part of recovery, because many times when we are trying to do skip tracing, we find the guarantors can help us to identify them and locate them. And we continue to advance the implementation of our loan management system. So would have launched it in 2022, and in December 2025, we launched the repayment portal. What that portal does, it allows persons to log on to their account, print their statement, make payments, and track their loan status. So that is a way of helping us to reduce and collect funds for the SLB.
I think, okay, I'd ask you to pause here now
No
and allow
problem.
for some questions.
All
And I'm
right.
sure during the course of the questions, you'll expand on the remainder of your submission. But, I hear you. Um, I, Remind me, I think you've been there for a few years, Ms. Walsh?
Yes, four and a
Um,
half.
Sorry?
4.5.
Right. Um, what you're saying here doesn't really jibe with my experience
Mm-hmm.
in trying to assist borrowers who come to their representative. I'm going to the public bodies document, and I see here that in 2025-26, between your expected credit loss and your debt reset program and your bad debt expenses, it would have been Hurricane Melissa support. It would have been close to 4 billion or so that would have provided for bad debt
Yes.
in that year. Um, but I'll use a case that I wrote you about,
Mm-hmm.
where, first of all, the borrower signed the agreement at 17, which I'm so lawyers have advised me is not legal, because a student loan is not a necessity. A tertiary student loan is not a necessity for a child. Signed the agreement at 17. Did one of those degrees that doesn't give you a high income at the end. The total borrowing, and I'm just going from memory, was around 1.2 billion. They had repaid 1.2 million, sorry, 1.2 million over the 4-year program. So it was like a 250 NCU sort of tuition rates at the time. So the total borrowing was somewhere in the region of 1.2 million. They had repaid something like 400,000 or 500,000. They now owed 4 point something million. Remember, they had signed the agreement at 17 as a child. The guarantor, principal guarantor, their mother, had had a stroke and was now dependent on her only child to maintain her. So not only was the payment impossible for her to make, but with the accumulated arrears, the guarantor was now actually a dependent rather than somebody to assist. And I wrote, make a representation on their behalf. And I was shocked at the cold response that I received from Student Loans Bureau. It was, maybe it was the AI response, I don't know. But a benefactor, I believe it was an overseas uncle, had offered to repay the entire principal of the loan to basically give his niece a restart because the person was now depressed, they couldn't get a loan to do any business because of their bad credit from Student Loan Bureau, etc. And the only thing student loan was willing to keep rescheduling the loan, but refused to, to write off some of the accumulated interest and penalties. Now, they're writing it off on their books, you know. As I said, in 1 year here, there's nearly 4 billion they've written off. So it won't cost them anything else. 4 billion. Billion. Student Loan Bureau is billion. The student was million, but the Student Loan Bureau is billions. Sorry? The 4 is common, yes. And therefore, to my mind, even as a commercial banker, it would make sense, having made provisions, clean up the loan, you can collect all your principal, and you move on, you stop collection efforts, the person gets a fresh start, and I just could not get Student Loan Bureau to budge. What is interesting is that they've collected zero on it since. They could have collected the entire principal, but they've collected zero. So this hard line doesn't even work because it just, the borrowers just become depressed and throw up their hands and resign themselves to the position. And in that type of behavior, Ms. Walsh, quite frankly, I find as oppressive. These students need help, especially the ones who are funded into programs that, you know, are not economically viable, quite frankly. The salary that the person started with at the end of their graduation, you know, their first job was 60-something thousand a month. Their student loan payment was 40,000. That's just not viable. So, you know, I'm really, you know, welcome this opportunity to get you before this committee to explain, because I found it, that behavior, quite frankly, cruel and oppressive and not even consistent with what a commercial lender would do, because a commercial lender would get back their principal and make whatever arrangements necessary regarding the interest.
Go ahead. All right. Just to respond to the query. So for the customer in question, I remember that incident. So the customer would have not paid for approximately 10 years. In that instance, there were in interest accrued, and also we would have outsourced that account to the external debt collector. Within our policy, what I would have sent and recommended what we could do within the framework that we are working with, we were offering to waiver up to $1 million based on the policy framework for the person to restructure the account so they can make monthly payments, because we still have to be working within a policy
But that
framework.
restructured would have been still 3 point something million. And if they couldn't service 1.2, how are they going to service 3 point something?
But the restructuring will give a longer time, says we'll have a more affordable monthly payment going forward. So we
Yeah.
would have waived based on policy
Smaller
and
monthly
based,
payment, but not more affordable, because they're going to pay a whole heap more interest for the life of the loan. This is like higher purchase, right? Um, you know, you stretch it out, the monthly payment might be less, but what you're ultimately paying is a lot more. But what I'm saying, they were, I don't know who sets your parameters, but as somebody who has spent a lot of my life in banking, it didn't even make sense from a commercial perspective, because bankers first seek to repayment of principal, and having got back your principal, then you can make, you know, generous accommodations on the interest and penalties, because you would have stopped accruing it on your books 9 years and 9 months previously. So this was all just paper debt that had accrued, and it had no realistic chance of repayment. So I just couldn't understand. And personally, if it was, you know, if it was me, I would have brought a class action suit against the Student Loan Bureau and said that all those loans that you made to 17-year-olds should be voided. FS, you want to say something? Could you turn off your mic, Ms. Walsh, so I can?
All right, just recommending that ideally, once persons start having an issue with repayment, we need them to come in immediately. When you sit down for 10 years, and that is the point at which you are going to be wanting the whole thing just removed, that's an issue. Come in before you have racked up all of that so we can address it.
But if when they do come in, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have come in earlier, but if when maybe they had no realistic prospect of settling it, the first time they got a chance to settle it, where a benefactor said, look, if you can if they'll accept the principle, I'll help you restart your life, so to speak. That's when they came in. So if they had no realistic chance of repaying it before then, I don't know. And as I said, I was really shocked with the lack of compassion, especially given that the parent of its only child had had a stroke and had now become a dependent on the borrower. So which made it even more impossible for them to service the loan.
What we're seeing when the students are in repayment and the SLB reaches out to them, they refuse to pay, they refuse to come in to seek the benefit in terms of restructuring or
Ms.
even
Walsh, it's not that they refuse to pay, they cannot pay.
they refuse in
It's
some
not that they
in
refuse.
some instances some students refuse to pay, some
Okay, but I
students
think
in
we need to
some
separate. I think we need to
instance
separate
may
those
not able to
who can pay but
r-
refuse to
I
pay.
agree.
But for those who are
However,
unable to pay, I
but
don't think
they
you should
will
say they
need to come
refuse to pay.
into the SLB prior to the 10-year period for us to look at a viable arrangement before the interest is occurred, before we also outsource the account. Because what we find is when we outsource the account and the debt collectors are now calling them, that's the time that we're contacting the SLB. So we are imploring students, if you're having difficulties, if you're unemployed, to contact us early in the game so we can make arrangements, whether not outsourcing the account, whether to delay the collections, whether to have a deferment on the account so the students will able to pay when they're in a position. But when the account is in 10 years, 5 years, 6 years of non-repayment, and as a banker, you can expect numerous of fees, numerous late fees, and also collection fees on the account.
Right, but as I'm saying, as a banker, it's pointless to keep accruing these book entries, which are just ballooned out of any realistic chance of repayment. But anyway, I won't belabor the point. I'll turn it over to Dr. Dawes.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm seeing where you're lending out $20 billion over the last 5 years, and you're making $8 billion on interest. That's about a 40% return on your investment, even with a 50% delinquency rate. That's pretty good. If you're a financial institution, I would buy stock. But don't you think that it is related that your interest income is so high and at the same time your delinquency rate is so high? And I said it's because if you have, as Chair said, a prohibitive structure where it is difficult for persons who want to pay and be up to date with their loans, you're going to collect a lot from those who can afford to, but then you're going to push many reluctantly into the delinquency pool. And I have an example of that as well. This young lady, she took a loan for undergrad, and in choosing to do her master's, she went in, explained to whoever it was who was handling her loan that she's now resorting to part-time employment in order to facilitate her further studies, and asked if she can reduce her payments, not stop them, not a moratorium, reduce her payments for the duration of her 2-year master's. And she was told flat out, no, your guarantor must pay. Now, in many instances, the guarantors, they just sign their name on the paper to help out a struggling student. In a case like this young lady just chose to stop paying. And I can't fault her for that. because she has to live. She has her living expenses, and she has reduced payments. She doesn't have exorbitant lifestyle. But the rules and regulations and the stiffness and rigidity of the Students' Loan Bureau made her a delinquent. And there are many persons out there like this with similar stories. Maybe you need to look at having a social worker, somebody with a little bit of a soft human touch, who can understand the individual circumstances that persons are going through, whether it is a guarantor becoming a dependent or whether someone is ambitious enough to want to go on to further studies and are just simply asking for a reduction in payments. You cannot have it so rigid that you're making so much money off interest payments and you're still having a high delinquency rate. I believe they are related.
All right. All right. It's unfortunate that the person was not able to get the support that she need. However, the Student Loan Bureau funds first for persons in undergraduate study, which means they will have 3 to 4 years in school and up to 14 months after graduation, which means the SLB do not collect any money for 5.5 years on any particular loan. It's a revolving fund, and while we would love to fund persons continuing studies, we would also love to collect so we can lend the next generation who wants to take advantage of the Bureau. We do have situation where students continue into tertiary study, and I can give a law, for instance. What we do, we give them a graduation date extension, so their loan will not be repayable until they're complete. But it's a case-by-case basis, and depending on the circumstances, then we will decide. So I'm not sure of that case or why that was decided, because persons would have come in indicated that they won't be able to start their repayment because they have further studies to do. Based on the information presented, we would have granted that in those individuals. But what we need to understand is a revolving fund, and while we are collecting $8 million in interest, we are also lending $20 billion in loan with a 48% delinquency. Ensure that every person in Jamaica have an opportunity to pursue a first degree. While we want to facilitate persons going on to a second degree, we want to take note to give the opportunity to somebody else can take that opportunity.
You had a follow-up, Dr. Dawes?
That
Oh,
point.
sorry.
I wanted to add something to that point. Um, I just need to clarify, just a point of clarification, that the interest income, that's interest earned on the financial reports, and it's not equivalent to interest amount that is collected. So I just want to make that clarification. In terms of, we disburse each year approximately $4 billion. And the typical year in program, average 3 to 4 years. Beneficiaries have approximately 15 to 20 years to repay the loan. We don't start collecting until after year 4, which is they have that 14 months after graduation date to start repaying the loan. And so even at, if it is that we were to collect even the monthly payment, let us say we collect 100% of the monthly payment that is required. At the rate that we disburse over $4 billion per year for each year, the ability for us to fund one program in terms of the first degree and then move on to the master's degree, that will put an impact on the fund. And I do take the point that, yes, it would have been a case where we would have pursued the beneficiary, its beneficiary at that point in time. And so for us to really collect and lend, it's hard really for us to finance the first degree for an applicant and then defer for another 3 or 4 years for a second degree. We're not saying it can't happen. We can happen where we would recommend the beneficiary for the pay as you study loan if they had already
Excuse me one second.
received.
Why do you
Sorry?
say beneficiary instead
Yes.
of borrower?
Because they benefit from the loan fund. And it's equivalent to the same thing. They are borrowers.
So,
Yes.
so BNS now can speak about its beneficiaries rather than its borrowers.
They
I
benefit
mean,
from a loan.
most of these loans are not even at subsidized rates. So why are they beneficiaries? They're
Well, they benefit from the student's loan because let me say something in terms of the interest rate. If it is that we're going to compare with a BNS, these are unsecured loans, and for if we compare in the market unsecured loan, we're looking at two double digits interest rate, and so whilst SLB, we play a dual role. We serve a social and national development role, as well as we have to ensure that we collect sufficient funds in terms of repayment so that we can lend to the future generation. And so I'm just going to go back to the point of the special case that you've raised. If that customer had come in earlier, we could have restructured the loan, because we've had customers who come in, restructure the loan, we waive off some of the interest or some of the late fees, and from time to time we do have discussions with the debt collectors, the external debt collectors, in terms of reducing the collector's fee once we've come to an arrangement where we can collect the principal as well as some portion of the interest and work with a payment plan. We need to relook at that case, but we do
my issue
accommodate.
is that that borrower was a child, did not understand the obligations they were entering into, and continues to be victimized by the Student Loan Bureau.
That's a
But
strong
anyway,
word.
Dr. Dawes, you had a follow.
Just for clarification, in the scenario I referenced, the person was not asking for a moratorium. They were not asking to stop paying. They were simply asking for a reduction in the monthly payments over the duration of their masters. And they were flat out told no. And that is different from what you're telling me about extension of the graduation date and so on. It's a completely different scenario. And that person became delinquent as a result. And I believe that there could have been some negotiations to say that since, yes, we understand we're primarily catering to first degrees, but if someone is ambitious enough to want to seek further studies, they're not asking for more. You're going to get more in terms of the interest payments. You are going to benefit. Just allow the person to cut the payments for a while. So that's something that I believe you need to look into. It may be worth getting a social worker to look at some of these issues because there are genuine concerns. There's something called medically indigent, where medical illnesses can wipe out an entire family's success. The last point I want to make, with the removal of guarantors, do you see this impacting on collections? Because I do know that you go after guarantors whenever you have a delinquent, what you call them, beneficiary. How do you see this playing out? What impact does having a guarantor have on your collections? And are there any mitigating proposals, seeing that we're removing guarantors now?
And in your answering, maybe you could say what percentage is actually paid by guarantors.
All right, I don't have the statistics about the percentage who are paying on behalf of the borrowers. However,
you.
I know they have a significant impact because if they do not pay, they will facilitate us by locating the students. So I think the significant impact is helping us to locate the students when we cannot find them through our skip tracing method. To respond to your question, I don't know the specific case. I'm not aware of the specific case because, as I said before, when we give waivers on offers, it's a case by case premise. So we do have students who pursue their postgraduate studies and we give them extension. We do have students who we reduce the payment to facilitate. And it may not be for pursuing their studies, but maybe because of medical issues or underemployment. There are cases like those. So I can't speak specifically to yours in particular, but I can take the information and I'll get back to you in terms of that particular instance. But we do consider the social impact of our customers, and that's why we have flexible payment options, we have restructuring, we have extending the moratorium period, because we have some students who, when they're to graduate, they may not able to complete because of many reasons, so we extend them for 2 years while in school. But the once we have those extension, what you will see is the interest being incurred, and then it will be excessive. So we try to have the communication for the persons to understand. Sometimes we will say to them, at least pay the interest portion. So at least you don't have that being compounded or affecting your delinquency. So the cases vary, it's a case by case, especially for those students who cannot pay or underpaying, because if we have a flat policy on that, it will affect what we collect. And some students, when we speak to them, sometimes a guarantor will say, okay, I will assist in paying at least half, and they will pay the other half. So when we say if you can seek the guarantors, because sometimes we want to prevent them from having this long-term loan being accumulated and compounded over the period. But
I,
I'll take your case, but as I said before, it's a case by case, and we do offer flexible arrangements.
I have Mr. Phillips, Mr. Newell. Anybody else? Miss, Miss. Oh, Mr. Clark was before. Okay, Mr. Clark. You know you always get preferential treatment. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the personnel from SLB. I would have listened to both yourself and member Dawes and most of what you are saying, or the question that you're asking are the same question that bothers my mind just the same. But Mr. Chairman, I'll go back some years back when you were much younger. There was an advertisement on JBC TV, Peter Red and Peter Blue.
A cigarette ad.
Fine. But we did not know for at least 6 months, we didn't know what it was. It was just Peter Red and Peter Blue coming until it came to us. We realized they were advertising a cigarette. My argument this morning, again, Mr. Chairman, as it was the last meeting that we had, far too often our agencies that are to provide for the citizens of this country, we don't know nothing about them. What Madam is saying to us this morning, you're speaking to almost your choir. The students out there, when last have you gone into a high school? Because student loan really caters to the first time, the high school going into university. When last have you gone into any of the high school to say, on career day, we are going there to present to them, for them to understand what is happening? Every?
You use the mic.
Sorry. So we have a public education program that we go into schools. So for last year, if my memory serves me correct, I think we visited over 200 high schools
In St. And
across
including St.
Jamaica,
James?
including St. James.
You
And
did that in what period of time?
I'm just getting for the financial year.
In one financial
One
year?
financial
You
year.
did 200 high schools?
200 and high schools.
I don't think you did any in South Manchester.
Yes, we
My-
are also have
My
a,
take,
we also have a
my take, Mr. Chairman, really is that so often around this time, you get that barrage of tertiary students going for the first time. MP, we're asking for your support, we're asking for a grant, we're asking for sponsorship. And you would say to them, have you tried SLB? And the answer, no, we don't know nothing about. So through our fault, they're just creating a narrative. I'm yet to learn. But
Okay.
I can't understand if you have SLB giving you, moving away all the obstacles, so to speak, at the beginning. You don't need no more guarantor but yourself. All you have to do is to go and we're finding it so hard for the young generation to go in and to start being responsible for themselves.
Ms. Walsh, what we had asked in your public education program, what we had asked last week to Hart, and I'll repeat it to
I'll
you.
do that.
You can send information packages to all the MPs, all elected representatives, because we're often the first point of contact for students, especially at this time of the year. Our offices are overwhelmed by people seeking assistance.
Mr. Chairman, I am extending the invitation to SLB, just as I have extended to Hard Trust. We have in the largest back to school fair treat at Jared Park on the
And
15th.
I'm going to start charge you for advertising that fear, because I'm
on
saving
the
you a lot of
15th
money.
of August.
Okay.
The contact person is Miss Patrice, 876.
No, it's okay. Give the no. Please give the number privately.
Okay.
No, give the number privately.
All right.
Yeah. Mr. Hines is asking if he can cut the line because he has a follow-up question to that same question.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. You said that you have been to over 200 high schools in Jamaica. To that, does that include private high schools?
No.
No?
No.
Well, my record says that the government has 173 high schools. So, I don't know. I'm just asking.
So some they visited more than
That's
once.
not correct.
Okay.
That's not correct. We meant at 780 something schools.
All right. No, I'm just wanting, maybe.
Go ahead, Mr. Phillips.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
I didn't get the answer, Mr. Chair.
Oh. Mr. Hines is waiting for an answer.
All right. I think based on my memory, I was working on a project for high schools in Jamaica. I think we have over 783 high schools in Jamaica.
783?
700 high schools.
No, I think you're mistaken.
That's so they're primary schools.
I think you're talking primary schools.
Well,
We
we,
don't
do
have that
go
many
to
high
primary
schools.
schools and high schools. Or junior high.
700 would mean an average of more than 10 per constituency. That's definitely not. That's not so. Yeah. So you need to check those numbers. Mr. Phillips.
Chair, thank you. I understand.
Sorry.
I've seen them in my constituency, Malgolly High School, and I've seen your team. But I think there's a cultural fear of the SLB. And I mean,
There should be.
yeah, no, and it is because of the approach, which is, I won't say understandable, but you have a revolving, and I've been on the PAAC since 2012, and I mean, they have been here on numerous occasions, and we have seen where there have been times when they were able to finance their own operations, and times when
Tomorrow.
it has to be subsidized by taxpayers. And there's a culture out there at the same time that once it's government money too, that there's not a need to repay. And there has to be, and there's also this culture. I mean, I've had the experience of signing a guarantor for a student. Myself and her father, a constituent of mine, and as she graduated, she just fly the coop. Well, thank God her father paid it, but never to answer a phone call from her father, just cut all communications, and so, but I joined a member Dawes, in the maybe looking at a cadre of social workers, yeah, because the many of those, especially for us in rural Jamaica, whose families are farmers, mother housewife, the father farmer, and I have found that a lot of students will come, and when you mention student loan, they say they say God will carry them through. And a lot of them by year 2 drop out of school because they can't sustain it at all. And they're afraid to approach the student loan bureau. The question I'd ask is looking at the interest rates, and you speak about quite proudly that there are many students that benefit from the 3%. I would love to know what percentage of those who get the 3% within the cohort that benefit from the 3%, but also what drives the interest rate, meaning why 10%, what are the indices that determine the interest rate itself? How many, I know in many instances as a rural MP, the underemployment or the lack of gaining employment is a big issue to many of them. And you find that a lot of rural students who originate from rural parishes, a lot of them, because of the cost of remaining in Kingston or to wherever it is that they went for universities, to stay there to try and find a job is not within their budget. So they end up back in rural Jamaica. And then to try to find jobs, a lot of them end up back in call centers. A lot of them, where for me, that's underemployment because they're not earning a salary that to be able to pay the student loan. But what mechanism do you have in place that after a student is delinquent for a certain time, that it doesn't reach to the 10 years that Member Bunting mentioned of the student that he knows, that a softer touch really and why I mention a softer touch, and I'm sure that the FS can attest to it, because when she's trying to collect GCT, when a business person see the interest and penalty, they don't even look at what was originally owed them. It frightens them that they don't even attempt to try and pay it, right? So it could be a similar situation with the SLB, and especially for those students who are unemployed or underemployed, in approaching to get them by even just offering without even them asking the question, what is manageable, that at least you're collecting something than nothing. Because while you're not collecting, the interest is still racking up. The interest starts from day one, from they take the loan. So by the time you're finished after 4 years or 5 years, there's an amount to be paid. And when you're not gaining employment, even in the 14 months that you have given them, I mean, I know of persons who leave law school who after 1 year still looking for work. And even when they do find work, what salary they are being paid annually, they can hardly live on it. And I mean, this is a law student. So, first, what drives the interest rate? Because the interest rate is basically like commercial. Like you can buy a car for a lesser interest rate. It's being offered by the commercial banks. So what drives the interest rate? And secondly, what other mechanism apart from putting a photograph in the paper, apart from, what social intervention is there to really encourage persons, seeing their situation, because it's not one size that fits all.
Right.
So that it ensures that you are able to collect something than nothing. And I, just following up on what a question the member asked, when the borrower is unable to pay and you now approach the guarantor, and if you are not able to collect from the guarantor, then what?
That's a
On?
longish question, or a longish run up to the question. Go ahead,
Right.
Ms. Wall.
All right, so let me start with the question in terms of the contact to to the customers. So we normally send out our first notice. We normally call the customers to say, first, you are going into repayment. So you have 14 months before you go into repayment. So a notice is sent about 6 months before the graduation day, not the graduation day, the repayment day, because they would have graduated before. So we would have advised them that come September, because repayment starts September 1 of each year. Come September, your loan is going repayment, and if you have any issues, contact the SLB. When they do miss the first or second payment, we also reach out to them again to find out if there's any challenges that they're having. So we do that up to sometimes a year, sometimes depending on the circumstances, 2 years before we outsource any sort of account to the debt collectors. And then some of the feedback from the customers, sometimes it's not even underpayment or not paying. Some students don't want to pay. But for those who cannot pay, we say come into the office for us to make some arrangements. So it's a really case by case instances. And I want to highlight too, we
When
do
you say come in, though, you just mean contact the office.
contact the
Because
office.
for rural people, I
No,
mean, you don't
contact
expect
the
them to.
office, right? And then they will send in documentation. For instance, if some persons might say they have been ill, then they will send in their medical certificate, and we make arrangement to delay or defer those payments. So it's a case by case depending on the circumstances. We do have payment plan, and that's what I said earlier. So the payment plan is when you cannot pay the monthly payment. Then we put you on a payment plan until you can regularize into your regular payment. So those things are offered. The challenge we are seeing is that the students are not contacting us. We cannot get to them, and some of them don't want to pay. And I'm going to give an instance. So there was a customer who complained that when we would have sent our bailiff to collect on our behalf, that we are causing her undue stress. And it was one, in the Glean on the article. That customer worked 8 places before not being unemployed. So when we checked the TAJ database, she actually had 8 different employment and was working. So I know there are customers who really cannot pay, but majority of the time, I can tell you, they don't want to pay, not even part of the repayment. And I said earlier, it's a revolving fund. I am a beneficiary of SLB. And that's why it is very important for us to collect so other persons can get that benefit to be in position to serve and give back to their country. So we do offer opportunities for persons who really have the issue, but majority of the cases are persons who don't want to pay. Secondly, if you recognize in the last 7 years, there's no more publication. So we are taking a softer side. We understand the economic challenges, and we understand that there are persons who may be caught in that cycle, and we don't want to take that approach anymore. So we are looking at going in terms of in the communities. We're having community fairs now. We are now going to partner with other external entities to get into the communities and the spaces for persons to understand the benefit of SLB. The reality is that
Ms.
the
Walsh, I'm going
current.
to ask you to try and make the question, because we have a lot of
Oh,
the
okay.
answers rather a bit more concise,
Oh, okay, no
because we
problem.
have a lot of questions to get to.
More questions?
Interest rate,
Right.
what drives
For the
it?
interest is something that we will review in terms of over the financial year. So we look at the economy, we look at what is happening in the space, and then we'll make a recommendation
Is
to the
it pegged to
ministry.
commercial loans?
No, it's not.
What is
No.
it pegged against?
It's really about cost of capital, about our overall cost and how to operate the entity and to have money coming into the fund so we can lend to have a sustainable pool of students going to school.
So the higher the delinquency, the higher the rate.
No, no, no.
I mean, if it's coming back to the cost of operating, then
So when there's a higher delinquency rate, that's how we normally get support from the Ministry of Finance. So to minimize the support, we try to ensure that we can collect as much as we can.
because you use the word social quite a bit,
Oh, okay.
social good. But when you
Yeah.
look at the interest rate, and it is-
9%
yeah,
when
it is close
banks
to
are
commercial
lending at
rate.
7.9% to
Yeah.
buy motor car. 9% doesn't seem like
A deal.
like a deal, but
Yeah.
I understand when you compare it with the same day loan
Unsecured,
people, then it would seem the unsecured payday loan, then it would seem like a deal. But
Yeah.
just in absolute terms, when inflation is running at 5%, and you're paying 9%, that's a solid real return. Anyway, Mr. Newell,
Or FS wanted to say something.
oh, the FS, you wanted to add something?
Yes, just in terms of it being a social good. It's a social good to the extent that it benefits the country. But if half of the people who you lend the money to jump on a plane after they graduate and we don't hear anything else from them, it's not benefiting the country. So we also probably need to be looking to put something in place to say if you take a certain thing from SLB or certain other things that you need to give back to this country for a certain period.
That's the bonding. That's the
Yeah,
bonding you're referring to.
some kind of bonding. Because it is the taxpayers. When we have to support, it is the taxpayers who are paying.
Well, I mean, you know, as I said, if you were lending them at 1% interest rate, yeah, then bonding might be relevant. But at 9%, I'm not sure that you could add bonding on top of that credibly. But Mr. Newell?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Walsh and your team, FS, for coming in. Delinquency questions, Chairman. On page 6, there is a, no, this is not page 6. What is this? Yeah. On page 6, there's a table with the categories of, well, the reasons for non-payment. And it states 6 reasons people do not repay their student loans: economic factors, employment-related factors, administrative/contact issues, borrower attitudes and awareness, personal circumstances, social behavior. What I want to find out is whether you have done any assessment of the spread of delinquency across categories, because looking at this listing, it seems to me that there are 3 categories that you may need separate intervention for, and there are 3 categories that you may need to step up collections for. Have you done any analysis of, because if somebody's not paying because of economic factors, the capacity of the economy to absorb them, for example, or personal circumstances, illness, etc. It's a total different thing from somebody who's not paying because of social behavior, contact issues, or borrower attitudes. So it seems to me that you would want to do that spread so you can target your intervention. Is that an approach?
That's
currently
approach
taken?
we can accept. We did not do that for the situation, for the delinquency rate. But we can do that assessment and then get further information.
Because in hearing the discussion about your loan rates, etc., my perception of SLB is, and I didn't get to benefit because at the time you needed a guarantor and I didn't have one. So I see you as a social lender, as distinct from a commercial lender. And if you're doing social lending, then the social circumstances of your borrowers matter in terms of your collection drive, because if you are using hard measures to collect from somebody who is unemployed and so delinquent because of some reason that will not allow them to pay, then in my mind, it's not the most efficient use of your time and your energy. So that is one. Another question, and by the way, your delinquency rate is not significantly different from many emerging economies, including some that are more advanced than ours. So Brazil, Chile, South Africa, for example, not suggesting that you should try to get to 60% like some, but it isn't. So that's one. The second question relates to your application process. You no longer require a guarantor. What is the process for applying, and what are the limitations on someone being approved for student loan now?
Thank you. So for our application process, it's fully online. The student creates an account, go on our portal, put in their information, their institution that they're going, and other personal information. The personal information is to see if they're eligible for a granting aid. So they have some questions that they will answer, and they will upload their documents and submit it to the SLB. Since this financial year, we have introduced our electronic signature. So the customer will get an email to say your loan has been pre-approved. You can get your contract documents. You can sign electronically and submit in to the SLB. So they don't need to come in unless they're under the age of 18, and I'll explain that later too. Under the age of 18, or if they are impaired, right, under the age of 18, that's the only way they will come in manually to sign. So that is the application process. The SLB's approval is based on acceptance into institution. So if you are not accepted, then the application is not processed. So once you have completed your application, all we wait on or depend on is for the institution to say, John Brown has been enrolled at Michael University and this is your tuition, and we will disperse. So we
So-
have pretty much a 99% approval
So
rate.
every Jamaican who is accepted to an approved tertiary institution is qualified,
Is qualified for
a,
SLB
a
loan.
loan from
Yes.
SLB. In terms of your interest rate, is there any consideration of national development priorities in terms of how you discount interest rates?
And that's why we mentioned about the STEM programs, because the STEM programs was an introduction of national priority. So instead of the 9.5 interest rate, it is 6% interest rate.
But STEM only covers perhaps one priority. But if we're looking to grow in terms of agriculture and other areas, is there any consideration of including those categories?
Well, that is something that we can internally review and make some recommendations.
So, and I would want to suggest construction and perhaps logistics as areas that would be worthy of consideration. Back on delinquency, do you report, so I get that you report to local credit bureaus. Do you report to overseas credit bureaus?
No, we don't.
Is there a reason?
Jurisdiction legislation in terms of sharing, data sharing, but that's something that we are working on.
So jurisdiction legislation on our part?
On our part.
Okay. Because it seems unfair to me that if someone runs off to another country where credit sometimes is even more, a credit rating is more important oftentimes than here, that they do not have the same penalty. And people respond to incentives. So if there's no disincentive, then someone might be less inclined to pay. Thank you. Those are my
Ms. Burchell?
few questions.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Vincek, Ms. Nikisha, Ms. Sergio, and the team. Thank you for coming.
Ms. Burchell, could you speak into the mic?
Not
We're
hear me?
hearing.
Okay. Good morning, all. Thank you for being here. I want to look at the future of the Student Loan Bureau. Education is changing rapidly. People are now more interested in micro-certification, stackable courses, online education. I note your table 2.0 said 2% of the loans you disperse go to other areas of studies versus our traditional areas. As we look to supporting the Jamaican people, especially those who are about lifelong education and lifelong learning. Is the SLB looking at repositioning itself, doing some market analysis or something to see life in the future of SLB, not just focused on our traditional UE, UTech, but students like myself? I'm a parliamentarian and I may want to go to school, but I want to do a course online. A farmer can't dedicate the hours to go to school. They want to do it with a university over there. How are we repositioning ourselves and then marketing ourselves to our people so they can take up these advantages to help them with their lifelong education?
All right, so same on the 2.0, you will see where the SLB is currently now developing a framework for short-term courses, and that include online certification or other certification outside of the traditional high schools, the traditional institution, my apologies. So we did do a quick study to see where students' interests are lately, and we recognize that they want to study in terms of shorter terms. They don't want to be in school for 4 years and 3 years, and their interest is now in robotics and cybersecurity and those kind of certifications. So we are positioning ourselves to capitalize on that market also with in AI training, because that is what is now being introduced in the market. So we are doing that, and we're hoping to complete that by the end of this financial year. And then we'll be marketing ourselves with the institution that we're partnering with to offer these certifications. So you can look forward to it.
Now that we've gone the first round, I have a question, a second question myself. Um, are you familiar with the concept of obsolete degrees? No? Okay, let me just read from a recent Guardian article, and it was specific to China, but it's happening globally. And here's a particular quote. A growing number of China's graduates holding freshly minted humanities, arts, and languages degrees find there is little demand for their skills. Meanwhile, the country's universities rapidly overhauling their curriculums in response to China's race to become a global leader in a slew of high-tech industries are culling obsolete degrees en masse. And flowing from this, I contacted the principal of Mona, and he says they're also overhauling their curriculums because there's a lot of obsolete degrees. So when I look at the delinquencies or the persons, the students, the student borrowers who approach me, and when you look at what they got their degree in, very often it is international relations, mass communications. There's a consistent set of, of university degrees where the graduates end up in call centers, which only need a secondary education, for example. Do you play any role in when you see, for example, the earlier case was mass communications, the borrower I was talking about, got the first job, this is back in the day, at one of our TV stations, degree in mass communications. The internship salary was 50,000 a month. The student loan payment was 40. So you have people in those situations who, no matter what, you could have restructured till the cows come home, they will have nothing left to. And even if, after the internship, they go up to 80, you can't pay rent, transportation, food, etc., and still, have anything left over from the salaries you're getting. So do you feel an obligation to monitor the market for these obsolete degrees, which universities now are calling, or put it this way, the better universities are actively calling, because you're really just hobbling the student borrower, who often, and I want to emphasize because we represent rural constituencies, most of the young people that come to my office around student loans, they are the first in they're in their generations. They're the first they can go back from to go back to the cane field or slavery. They're the first one to have an opportunity to go to university. Their parent might be an ancillary worker, might be a peasant farmer. They don't have the sophistication to advise them as to what is a economically justified degree to say, look, go to business rather than humanities. I have tons of graduates in social work who can't get a job. Not that social workers are needed, but they're just not posts to be filled. So I'm saying, you can, in a sense, at the front end, filter and preempt some of these degrees that are now considered, and I'm using the language of the article, obsolete degrees. But the universities are calling these degrees because they're generating hundreds of graduates who cannot get a salary job commensurate, that it gives them put it this way, and put it the other way, they cannot get a return on their investment in tertiary education because their degrees are not relevant, are not seen as relevant by employers.
Whilst you are making that suggestion to the SLB team, it's really a high school career day, That's what career day is really about. And I have the problem, You have some degree that some youngster tell you that them have, and you wonder, on God's earth, why use it though?
I know, but I'm saying, obviously we can't leave it to the high school counselors, right? SLB is attempting to make wise lending decisions. So part of their mandate must be to say, don't make sense, make a loan that I know the high probability will be when this person graduates, they can't service the loan. You can even back test your data and look at what are the degrees. I think you mentioned law that people often struggle to service, but you can do your data mining to really generate what are the degrees that we find are poor investments, in that they take on this debt, but the additional income they earn from having a university degree does not compensate them. It's not a good return on that investment. Mr. Newell wants to add a rider to that.
Not a rider, but you went down a road which Member Birchall and I were just discussing, which is the need and the first generational. And I'm wondering whether I know that some consideration is given to PATH beneficiaries, but in my constituency, PATH doesn't adequately capture the level of poverty across, because there are different things that prevent persons from getting onto PATH. So I'm wondering if any consideration is given to the kind of scenario Chairman mentioned, where first generation, and the struggle that comes with that, which will manifest after you graduate in a limited network and probably a lesser opportunity to get employment that might become. You might not have the uncle or the aunt who can give you an introduction in terms of even, some of the support that people get in seeking employment. So I'm wondering whether there's room for consideration to be given to that kind of social background, you being a social lender. You being a social lender, yes. Thanks.
All right, thank you for the questions. So to answer Mr. Bountin question first, Chairman, sorry. So the SLB currently have data on delinquency per program. So we have a list of all institutions and all programs and the delinquency rate. What we are doing is partnering with the universities to share this information, because if and when the SLB is strapped for cash, then we will lend the programs with the lowest delinquency rate. But at this moment, because of the availability, we do not discourage persons from pursuing their education. However, it is something that is we are taking into consideration because we do have programs with 97, 98, 80% delinquency rate. And we are
But
sharing those with the universities to show them
no, but
the data.
but with respect, Ms. Walsh, if you have a program with a 97 delinquency rate, you are doing that student a disservice by lending them. I mean, I think you have a duty to say this, if, at least warn them, to say, look, you may want to reconsider or get some career counseling around this because we have found that 90%, 97% of students who pursue this program can't make the repayment. I think, not just because you have the funds, but you have the data as well. And I mean, a 97% is is really a serious delinquency. Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's probably one student per year who in that program that can service a loan. So I think, the point I think that myself and the members are trying to make is that the best time to resolve a bad loan is when you're evaluating it, or the best way to deal with bad loans is to prevent them. So if you have the data that can guide, as I said, coming back to, we have people who are the first in their families, the first, they don't have any uncle, aunt, mother, father, grandparent who went to university. They're the first who have that opportunity, but they don't have all the information that Mr. Clark might have to guide his children, or Dr. Dawes, for example. So they need some help from the social lender to steer them away from the paths that are going to put them into delinquency with the best effort in the world. And they end up with this sword of Damocles over their head for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Point taken. That is something we will review internally and make a decision on. And I wanted to answer the question about the social support for those students who are not on path. So the SLB gives granted aid to students not just on path, but from low income households. So if you can look at the statistics for 25-26, 5,674 students benefited from the granting aid that we offer as support in terms of assistance for their non-tuition expenses.
So when you say granting aid, this is like a fixed sum, or you say you pay their boarding, or you pay
No, it's
their,
a $60,000 that we allocate to the individual. So the students get those
so it's a
funds
one-off grant
one-off on an annual basis. So they
for
can
the
be
4
qualified
years
for
or
grants
whatever.
every year while they're in school. So we do offer those social support, not just for PATH programs, but persons who are in those economic conditions.
How do, well, I must say, I'm becoming aware of this particular grant for non-tuition expenses. Again, in the package that you're going to send to
It's always
MPs, please give us information about this,
Yes,
because
we
we often make grants from our CDF and so on, but it's far short of what is the total that is required. So if to the extent,
to the students who are needy, meaning so they're from a low household income, when they ask who support them, they may not have any support path or what are the state students.
so one cocoa full basket.
Right.
So if we can find 100,000 there or 60,000 here and so on, it would help. So I'm personally interested. I'm sure all my colleagues are interested in hearing how
And
to
I
access
want
those
to make
programs.
a point of correction. The 200 on odd schools is over the last 5 years, not last year.
So 200 and odd visits.
Visit over the
So-
last 5 years.
So one school might have been visited multiple times.
Over the last 5 years, right. So I just needed to clarify that.
All right, members, are there? Yes, Mr. Morris.
Thank you. I think I would want to add Miss Walsh. Miss Walsh, I would want to add also that having realized that we have students enrolling in courses that are turning up some 98% delinquency rate, I would encourage you not just to reach out to the universities, but also to pay more attention to the secondary schools, the high schools, because they too have their own curriculum, their own programs, and they too need to use that kind of information that you have to inform how we structure the programs at the high school level. And remember now, you don't need to be there. There are guidance counselors and there are career guidance and personnels there who can use that information to guide the students properly. So I would recommend that you include that. Um, I would like to also use this opportunity to highlight that many of our students are really, should I say, turn off. Some are really turn off by approaching SLB to get a student loan because of what other persons share. You know, persons who are now in their 30s, many of them have bad experiences. I know of someone today who is still repaying their loan, a loan they would have taken from about 2008, thereabout, 2009. So these persons, I think we need to pay attention to them. Of course, some deliberately refuse to pay, but then there are others who have genuine issues. We need to call them in. And for the new borrowers, we need to help them to understand that the student loan is here to help. So we change the culture, the way in which community members look on and think about the student loan. Like my colleague members, they are refusing to borrow from you. And if it is that you intend to do some revision in the near future, I would definitely want you to consider a lower rate because when you compare your rate with that of others, I know it is somewhat consistent, but then you talk about the benefits to our country. So I would encourage that our rate, the SLB rate, your rate, be a little less than the other institutions. I have a question for you also. I would want to know what the take-up rate is like since you have removed the need to have a guarantor in place.
You need to press your button.
The data.
Go ahead.
All right. On the first point, what the SLB has done in the last year and a half, we have introduced a financial literacy program because what we recognize is that the persons are not aware, they don't understand the loan process, and they will hear, similar to what you mentioned, stories about other persons' experiences, which may not be the realities today. And in that financial literacy, we go into the community and the spaces to educate them on the importance of education and how the SLB is a partner and will help them to achieve their career choices. So it is important because I recognize as well that many of the challenges that are some of the issues the students are saying is that the parents themselves are the ones who do not want them to take a SLB loan because of probably prior experiences. So we are also looking to see how we can strengthen and have a parenting workshop, whether in a constituents or otherwise, to educate the persons and the parents about the importance of education and how the SLB is here based on the benefits that we offer. Uh, on the point of the removal of the guarantor, for 24-25, we had 6,888 applications, and we see in 25-26 it moved to 8,005. So while there was a dramatic decline because of other reasons, we are actually seeing the application uptake increase year after year.
And correlation and causation is not necessarily the same. So would you say, even if not from a study, but from anecdote,
in the university rate, but yes, there's an increase in SLB rate, and I know it's because it's more accessible for persons to.
Had asked before.
I think it is almost is wrong to withhold that information from the students who are making decisions. You want them to make as informed a decision as possible. Um, and yeah, and I think while you are not responsible for setting, you're not in the Ministry of Education, and you're not responsible for setting the curriculums or the programs at the tertiary institutions, but it comes back to you in the delinquency rate. So it's in your own interest as an institution, and it's certainly in the interest of the borrowers to have as much information as possible at the front end so that they can make the best informed decisions. I know a, I know a lot of young people, they just want to go to university, and sometimes anything that they're accepted to. And I have one case, fortunately, it's not a student loan, but a young lady, a young student who was a childhood diabetic, had a, because of that, had a great passion for endocrinology, applied to UWI to do medicine. Grades obviously weren't enough to get her directly into medicine. They accepted her to do international relations. She just wanted to go to university, so she did it. 4 years later, she's still at the same place she was after high school. You know, she still has the passion for endocrinology, but is no better positioned after 4 years of expenditure to pursue that. So again, somebody guiding her at the front end could have said, maybe go into natural sciences. That would at least, give you, even if you couldn't get into medicine the first time around, but it would give you a second chance to get into, if you had the right foundation. So I find that there's a lot of um, ignorance, let us call it that. And I'm not blaming it on the students, but as I said, they have no families, they have no formal program to share that information with them. I think, for example, financial literacy should be taught in all our high schools, and helping them to make these, you know, um, economically beneficial decisions, teaching them about discounted cash flows, etc. So they think of their education as an investment, not just as a status, by being able to go to university. So I leave those with the experience of many terms representing people. Any final questions? If not, then it's just for me to thank the FS, Ms. Walsh and her team from the Students Loan Bureau. And I hope, having heard from the representatives of the people, that you, for those who are not unwilling but unable to pay, you will bring some more compassion to resolving their issues, and helping them to get a fresh start in life, because it literally affects people's mental health. They go into depression when they know they are just unable to pay, and they're being hounded by debt collectors. They're their credit rating is shot. It cuts down their options for life. And often, or some of them made those decisions when they were children and really weren't informed, or in my mind, even legally capable of making those commitments. So with that, thank you very much. I don't know if you have any final statements you want to make before we go on.
Thank you for having us. And I just want to end in a positive note. While we take some of the recommendation and we will be reviewing based on the questions answered, I just want to say that the SLB has been supporting and is supporting many Jamaicans over the last 55 years. Some of the stories we hear is about persons who are not, delinquent or having challenges, but there are also so many success stories about persons who would have, gained rightful employment and build a career based on the work and the opportunities like what SLB have provided. So thank you for having us, and we look to improve our processes and ensuring that many more Jamaicans will benefit in the future.
And just for clarity, we're not saying that they're not those who have benefited and that a student loan bureau has not served a good social purpose over a long period of time. But we tend to represent those who fall in the cracks. Those who are successful can represent themselves. The MPs are the ones who end up having to be the voice for those who are voiceless or have the least resources to get their voices heard. So thank you very much. You're free to leave at any time. Just in terms of returning to the agenda, members, we're at AOB. If there's no AOB, then it's just for us to set the date of the next meeting. I imagine Parliament will be on recess, should be on recess, if not already, then shortly. Shall we set a date? I don't like to leave without setting a date, but it would be in September, way down in September. Can you find a date in September for me? I'm sure the dates must be open. What about the fourth week in September? The fourth Wednesday in September at 10 a.m. And I say that because certain things happen on the third week that we don't usually. All right. What what date is that, Ms. Hunter? '28? No, it can't be 28. Just give Ms. Hunter 1 second. So the third Wednesday in September. Sorry, the fourth Wednesday in September. That's the 23rd. That's the 23rd of September. All right, members, 23rd of September at 10 a.m. Will the next meeting, and I hope you have a productive summer break, and that all your students you will be able to assist all the students who attend at your office. Good luck. Good luck in that endeavor. Thank you all very much. I think we've had a good session. Our annual report was tabled yesterday. Thank Mr. Phillips for standing in for me at that point. And I wish you all a good holiday. Motion for the adjournment. Oh. On the motion for the adjournment.
Motion. For clarity, because of the lesson Member Warmington gave at the first meeting, do we need a resolution to allow the chairman to set the next meeting since we're going on recess? Or
no, this is why I set the meeting. I set the meeting now.
Okay.
We set it for the 23rd of September.
September
Wednesday,
23rd.
The 23rd
Oh, I
of
stepped
September.
out. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Motion for the adjournment, Mr. Newell and Mr. Clark. Thank you.
I want to say thank you all for joining us live from Garden House and also the Jamaica House press conference. We have some news to give you before we go off air. Right here in the Make We Talk program, we have some news to give to you. And the news we have to give to you is join Wilfred Samuel Rattigan on Wednesday, July 15th, 2026 at 8 p.m. on Come Visit Rattigan, special report, exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program. He will be coming to you live from Africa. Let's join Wilfred Samuel Rattigan as he comes to you live from Africa on Come Visit Rattigan, special report, exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program. It's going to be a program that you do not want to miss. That's this evening, Wednesday, July 15th, 2026 at 8 p.m. His exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program. Mr. Rattigan will be coming to you live from Africa on Come Reason with Rattigan. That's this evening at 8 p.m. US time, 7 p.m. Jamaica time. An exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program on Come Visit Rattigan with Wilfred Rattigan live from Africa. He will be coming to you live from Africa this evening at 8 p.m. At 8 p.m., coming to you live from Africa at 8 p.m. His special guest, exclusive interview, I should say, an exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program. That's Come Visit Rattigan, special report, an exclusive interview with a Jamaican live from Africa. Thank you all very much for watching. Good afternoon. So there you have it. You come on over this evening at 8 p.m. US time, 7 p.m. Jamaica time. Come Visit Rattigan. Special report, exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program at 8 p.m. Jamaica time, 8 p.m. US time, 7 p.m. Jamaica time. This Wednesday evening, July 15th, 2026, as Wilfred Rattigan come to you live from Africa and Come Visit Rattigan. A special report, exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program. So come on over this evening, July 15th, 2026 at 8 p.m. US time, 7 p.m. Jamaica time on Come Visit Rattigan. Special report, exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program. You do not want to miss this. It's going to be an exclusive interview as he comes to you live from Africa. So until then, join him at 8 p.m. on Come Visit Rattigan. Special report, exclusive interview with a Jamaican in the TCN program. I am Jeffrey Tavares saying so long. Until you hear my voice again. Have a great afternoon and join us this evening as we all go over to Come Visit Rattigan to listen to an exclusive interview he's going to have as he comes to you live from Africa. Good afternoon, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. God bless you. And may God bless our island home, Jamaica land we love. Have a great afternoon. See you at 8 p.m. on Come Visit Rattigan. Good afternoon.
As children, we learn the true meaning of being a hero. Being a hero requires great sacrifice for others, not just ourselves. We learned about the heroes of Jamaica's past and how much of themselves and their lives they had to give in building a nation we should be proud to call home.
If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk! Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength, make we reason, make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength, make we reason, make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength, make we reason, make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength, make we reason, make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength, make we reason, make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength, make we reason, make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength, make we reason, make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength, make we reason, make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va. No upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it now help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it now help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it now help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it now help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it now help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it now help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it now help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents Yard and Broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it now help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight.
Sorry. The pepper spreaders man eye. Spreaders man eye. The pepper spreaders man eye. Sorry. The pepper spreaders man eye. Spreaders man eye. The pepper spreaders man eye. Sorry. The pepper spreaders man eye.
Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon.
Spreaders man eye. The pepper spreaders man eye. Sorry. The pepper spreaders man eye. Spreaders man eye. The pepper spreaders man eye. Sorry. The pepper spreaders man eye. Spreaders man eye. The pepper spreaders man eye. Sorry. The pepper spreaders man eye.
Nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va. No upper echelon. Nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica. Make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad of the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad of the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad of the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad of the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad of the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad of the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad of the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk.
Oh, what a woe situation, what a woe.
Spray this man eye. The pepper spray this man eye. Sorry. The pepper spray this man eye.
Oh, city.
Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk.